devotees that I consider greatly, greatly, greatly my superior, and that is Yamuna Devi Dasi. Yamuna Devi Dasi, now I don't know about all the temples in Europe, but in America, every temple has, every morning, the Govindam prayers sung by Yamuna. That's here at all your temples in Europe too. And Prabhupada instituted that when he was present because she's a very great devotee and it did so much service. And so this is a book that's very valuable. Like I was saying last night, all of Prabhupada's disciples that were really close to him, like Shamsundar, Mukunda, Yamuna, Janaki, Malati, there were a number of disciples that spent a lot of time with him and saw his dealings, his personal dealings with others. And I think that is probably, I think that would help really a lot of devotees to understand how to deal with others and to deal with our God sisters and God brothers and how to deal with new people that come, because Prabhupada had all the perfect qualities, has all the perfect qualities. And so I was thinking that maybe there is a book called Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, which is really wonderful. The guys would love it. You read it, right? No? Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. It's by Shamsundar, 3 volumes this size. And it's, in my opinion, it's the most wonderful book. I just wish it wouldn't have ended, really. And I think he's put it on audiobook now, too. So some of these old devotees who were with Prabhupada in the very beginning are trying to share what they received, that love, that wonderful love, and also the wisdom of how to live as a Vaishnava. Because I don't speak for you because you have Indian heritage, so you have more knowledge of these things. But we as Westerners don't have a clue. We come from, a different clan. And so what we have to do is understand how Prabhupada dealt with others. And so I was just going to read a short little thing that Yamuna wrote, and that is her own experience. In September of 1966, that's long before you were all born, Jamuna was in New York for 10 days to attend the wedding of her younger sister Janaki. During that time, she heard Srila Prabhupada tell the story about love and liquid beauty. The story was like a punch in the solar plexus. She cried and thought, yes, it's true. In the material world, there's so-called love, but it's nothing like the real love that Swamiji, he was called Swamiji then, Swamiji speaks about. After New York, I left with Janaki, who was the first woman Srila Prabhupada initiated, and her husband Mukunda Das, who was one of the first 11 male disciples Srila Prabhupada initiated. We went to San Francisco and picked up 2 old friends, Sam Spearstra and Melanie Nagel, who turned out to be Shamsundar Das and Malati Devi Dasi. With their help and the help of a few more interested people, we started the San Francisco temple in January of 1967. By the way, that temple consisted of a tiny storefront, half the size of this room, half the width of this room. It was just a little storefront with a glass front, like a shop. And I met Srila Prabhupada only a few days after they opened it, in January of 1967. It was in January of 1967, Srila Prabhupada came to San Francisco to encourage and guide us. And when he went on his daily morning walks, anyone could go with him. So I was walking with him one morning, and I said, Swamiji, do you think sometime you could allow us to go to Vrindavan with you? And Srila Prabhupada turned around and said, oh yes, I will take you to Vrindavan one day. I will show you Vrindavan on foot. I thought that that was the most hopeful thing I had ever heard in my life. I was just waiting for that time to come. In 1968, August, we went to London to try to start the British Yatra, and about a year later, Srila Prabhupada came, and on the invitation of John Lennon of the Beatles, stayed with his disciples in John's Tittenhurst Park estate. After his morning walk on the estate, Srila Prabhupada would sit alone in his little greeting room, take off his socks, and sing prayers while he played the harmonium or the drum or a pair of kartals. One morning, I was sitting silently on the stairs outside his room listening to Srila Prabhupada singing. I don't know how he knew I was there. Come on. I don't know how he knew I was there, but when he'd finished he called me. I went in and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm listening, Srila Prabhupada. Your singing is so beautiful." He said, "Do you want to come in and listen?" And I said, "Yes, very much." He said, "You can play drum and I will play harmonium and Purushottam can play kartals." Then for several mornings, we recorded Srila Prabhupada singing a prayer by Narottam Das Thakur, Hari Vignapiti, Hari Hari Bifale. Hari Hari Bifale Janama Gyana. When I heard Srila Prabhupada sing this, I said, "What does this prayer mean?" Because we didn't have songbooks at that time. So he explained the meaning to me that, "Oh, my Lord, I have wasted my life. Although I have taken a rare human birth, like a miser, I have not served Radha and Krishna, and thus I have knowingly drunk poison." When Srila Prabhupada sang this bhajan, he went so deeply into the mood of this prayer that I have not served Radha and Krishna, that he repeated this line 8, 9, and 10 times. Then he sang the next verse 8 or 10 times, going deep into its meaning. Golokera Premadana Harinama Sankirtana. The treasure of divine love in Goloka Vrindavan has descended as congregational chanting of Lord Hari's holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Why did my attraction for this chanting never come about? Day and night I'm burning in this dark world without working to make the correction. After he'd sung this song, Srila Prabhupada said, "So Yamuna Prabhu, yes, this is what women were all addressed as Prabhu, by Prabhupada, and you too, men and women, girls and boys." And the reason for that, I think it had a different meaning. It didn't mean male or female. It meant that the day that he took the name Srila Prabhupada, on that very day, and I was there present for that, was in 1968, in May, in Boston. And he said, "So I am the Prabhupada." That means the one at whose feet all the Prabhus come and take shelter. And you are all the Prabhus who have taken shelter of me. So it was not male, female, gender at that time. And he knew Hindi, Sanskrit, Bengali, and I don't know what else. And he said, so it was a designation as his disciple. It was not a gender thing. Now it's become that. Maybe language changes, languages change in time. But what he understood and what he said was, now you all call one another as Prabhu. He had me call my husband Gaurasundar Prabhu, and Gaurasundar called me Govindadasi Prabhu. And Prabhupada wrote many letters. My dear Himavati Prabhu, that was the wife of Hansa Duda. My dear Arundhati Prabhu, that was the wife of Pradyumna. And the meaning was that you are my disciples. You are the Prabhus who have taken the shelter of me, of my lotus feet. I mean, that is the meaning of it at the time. And that's why you'll find even today, even now, you'll find all these old disciples, old Prabhupada disciples, they all call one another Prabhu because we were told that. And that all changed later. But anyway, that's why. I'm just explaining why Prabhupada said this, because he had just given that instruction only a few months before. Yeah, it was in May, and this was in, oh no, it would have been a year later, okay, because he didn't go to England immediately. So then, after he'd sung this song, Prabhupada said, Yamuna Prabhu, what is your favorite prayer? I only knew the prayer from the introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, so I said, I like the Shishtaksika prayers. He said, oh, that's very nice. I said, Swamiji, what is your favorite prayer? And he said, this prayer, Hari Hari Bifale. And yes, this is true. Many times he told me this was his favorite song. And he would sing this particular song, and tears would just stream down his face. And he actually really felt that. He felt he'd wasted his life. He felt that he had wasted his life by not serving Radha Krishna. So look at our condition. I mean, but he's so humble. He didn't have any attitude that I'm a big Swami and I know all this stuff. No, nothing like that. He had the attitude of, I'm the most fallen. Please. That's how he always was. He was like that, and he never changed. He was like that when we had barely enough money to pay the rent, and he was like that 10 years later when we had temples all over the world. He didn't change at all. He remained very, very humble at the Lord's lotus feet. Oh, good night. This is the last time I'll see you. So, a party of about 20 devotees, a third of them ladies, arrived in India on October 4th, 1970, and until March of 1972, several of us traveled throughout India with Prabhupada, serving together and chanting the holy names on a Nagara Sankirtan like a close family. By Prabhupada's mercy, he allowed all the ladies close proximity to him on his personal Sankirtan party. In the Vaishnava history in India, this was revolutionary, and the effect it had in India was profound. In fact, it shocked India. Every place we went, the front page of the newspaper would have an article on the dancing white elephants of devotees who were going through the streets chanting the holy names. So I don't know if you've heard of the dancing white elephants. Has everyone heard of the dancing white elephants? What about you? You're about as white an elephant we can get. Have you heard of the dancing white elephants?
I did not understand everything that you say. Have you heard about the dancing white elephant?
No? No? You haven't heard of the dancing white elephants? Come closer. Come closer, white elephant. The dancing white elephants? Oh my, that's how Prabhupada turned all of India upside down. He brought Westerners, white Westerners, the Germans are the whitest, and brought them to India, and they danced on stage chanting Hare Krishna, both the boys and the girls. And all of India had never seen such a thing. And at that time, India was following the West. They were enchanted by the West. This is 1970s, early 70s. And so what happened was that there were 50,000 people coming to his pandals. He turned all of India, more than 50,000 people actually. I think that's an underestimate. With his dancing white elephant. He called us his dancing white elephants because the India was following the West, and he brought the West to India. It was very clever. And we're more or less useless, so we're like dancing white elephants. You've heard of pink elephants. Well, we were white elephants. Everybody's heard of pink elephants, haven't they? Is that a cultural thing? It's sort of like something that doesn't really exist, it's useless. Yeah, Is it a cultural? Anyway, okay, so what his Nagar Sankirtan was that they went from town to town, Prabhupada with this party of devotees, boys and girls from America, and some from Europe too, and did street Sankirtan. You've seen pictures in Gujarat with flowers. They were people throwing flowers from the balconies, haven't you? You've seen that. Have you ever seen the following Srila Prabhupada videos? You need to make much more. That will. You need to go right through them from all the way through. They're beautiful, and the best ones are the number 2. The second one is the best, because the mood was still electric. The politics, there were no politics yet. It was just electric. The first one is pretty okay, but it's kind of like nobody really knew anything. But the second one, it was like London, Rath Yatra, Prabhupada dancing, beautiful. Yeah, these videos are very valuable information. It's called Following Srila Prabhupada. You can get it on little flash drives. You can get it on discs. It was done by Yadubar. What he's done is he's taken, have you seen them?
I've seen them.
Have you seen them? In Norway, do they have them? Oh my gosh, you guys, you're missing out. You're really missing out. I mean, they're beautiful. What it is Yadubar. I'm sure you know who Yadubar is. He did the movie, the Hare Krishna movie that went all over the world. Well, he took clips, segments from many different videos and photographs that were taken over the time that Prabhupada was here. And then he went around to each disciple and he recorded information. So there's several tracks. There's a kirtan track, there's a Prabhupada talking lecture track, all of the same thing. And there's devotees talking, like it'll have Yamuna Devi talking, or Prithu talking, or different devotees. He came to my house in Hawaii and recorded some things that our memories, this is for you guys. This is what we're leaving you. This is your inheritance. It's a very good inheritance, too. So you should definitely check it out. Anyway, you can find them they're online. And so that's what he did. And it was very exciting in India because it was revolutionary. No one had ever seen it. I mean, this is like seen anything like it before. There's white Americans and Europeans and traveling all over India and singing the holy name with drums and kartals. It was a fulfillment of Srila Bhaktivinoda's, the beginning of the fulfillment of his prediction. So back to what I'm reading here. Let's see. That was his Nagar Sankirtan. And Prabhupada's mercy that we were serving together on the Nagar Sankirtan just like a close family, all traveling in a bus. And this was revolutionary, and the effect it had in India was profound. In fact, it shocked India. Every place we went, the front page of the newspaper would have an article on the dancing white elephants of devotees who were going through the streets chanting the holy name. At the Magh Mela in February of 1971, Srila Prabhupada was speaking from the 6th canto for the first time, the story of Ajamil. Everyone in our party lived just to hear Srila Prabhupada speak. To be with Srila Prabhupada was one thing, but to hear his Bhagavatam class every morning, we would run for the class. And I can vouch for this. This is true. I would sit right next to, I did this too. I would sit right next to his Vyasasan at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. In my early years of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada was so open and so merciful to the ladies that he never gave much stricture or separation. But at this Mela, Achyutananda Swami, who had been living in a Gaudiya Math temple for some time and who was aware of etiquette, told me, Yamuna, have you, I haven't read this, Yamuna, have you noticed where all the other ladies are sitting? And I said, yes, I have. The other ladies were way in the back. Achyutananda Swami said, you should be sitting there too. So the next morning I sat way in the back. Later that morning, Srila Prabhupada called me and I went into his tent and paid my obeisances. And before I got up, he looked at me with plaintive eyes and said, you don't like to hear from me anymore? I burst into tears. And I said, I love to hear from you more than ever, Srila Prabhupada, more than anything in the whole world. All I want is to hear from you. Then Prabhupada said, so why you weren't sitting nearby? I said, Achyutananda Swami told me that it was the etiquette that I sit far in the back with the ladies. And Prabhupada was quiet for a moment. Then he said, yes, that is etiquette, he said. Srila Prabhupada, how many times were you with your Guru Maharaj? He immediately said, since I met him, I have never been away from him, not even for 1 second. But I was a little forceful. I said, but how many times were you with him physically? Prabhupada said, very few, maybe 5 or 6 times. But they were very intimate and meaningful to me. Then he said, many of my godbrothers were big sannyasis and thought that associating with the spiritual master personally was most important. But in some cases, they are no better than mosquitoes on the lap of the king. And what is the business of mosquitoes? It is simply to suck blood. So don't think that that's the only way to associate with the spiritual master. You try to hear from me. For me, this was a tremendous learning moment. Up until then, I couldn't conceive of ever being separated from Prabhupada or that he would die. But at this time, I realized that there would be a point in the future when I would be physically separated from him, and I would have to come to terms with this. This is something we all had to come to terms with. It was a very difficult time for all of us. I also felt very much like this, that I never thought he would leave us. I always thought he had the energy of a 7-year-old. I always thought he would be with us forever. And then one day, it all changed. And we had to learn how to serve in separation. And I can't say that I've learned completely, but I have a little bit of a glimpse. And I think it's so important for young devotees to make the connection with Srila Prabhupada so that they will be able to stay devotees all their lives. Because so many devotees come being attracted by the wonderful kirtans and the wonderful temples and the deities and the prasadam and the whole way of life. But then somehow or other, many of them leave. And the reason they leave is because they don't have that connection. They don't have that connection with Prabhupada. So you have to work on that. You must work on it if you want to be here all your life. If you want to be... don't you know people who've left? Don't you know people? I know there's tons of ladies that have left because of the way they're treated. But there's guys that have left too. It's very sad because... And if we take part in driving someone away, it's not a very good thing on our resume. It's a very bad thing. We have to try to help anyone who comes. Because, you know the rep, it's like millions of births, then you get a chance, and then if somebody is very rude to you, I had a god sister in Houston just tell me not too long ago, she got her feelings hurt and she walked out and never went back. She never went back. But, I met her and she's still around but you know what I'm saying, the important thing is that, like I mentioned that article last night about the New York Times, this girl who had left, she doesn't even believe in God anymore. And she was at a temple for 6 years. She was initiated. She was doing the whole thing, the Mongol Arctic, the book distribution, the whole bit. And she doesn't even believe in God anymore. So how do people get like that? We need to ask ourselves, what happens to them? And do we have any part in that? Do we share any responsibility for the fact that they left? We need to realize that our actions and our words and the way we treat others makes a difference. And we need to see how Prabhupada treated others. He treated everyone with utmost kindness. All the ladies were treated so nicely. We're his daughters. He treated us like daughters. And he encouraged us. I was rather shy. I was young. I was only 20. But he wanted us all to learn to do kirtan. He pushed us. He pushed us to learn to speak, to learn verses, to learn to speak to the public. He wanted an army of preachers. He didn't want wallflowers. He wanted preachers. Because Lord Chaitanya's movement has to spread. And it has to spread all over the world. And even though we war come, he used to say, the preaching will be very good after the war. Are you familiar with that statement, too? That's a pretty common one. No? It's really common. Everybody knows that one. That Prabhupada used to say, he would talk about coming war. He would say, the preaching will be very good after the war. Meaning people had their illusions shattered, and so they would be more open to hearing. So anyway, I hope this is okay. I mean, I think it's beautiful. I haven't read hers, so I don't even know. This is new for me, too. Let's see here. Where were we? In March of 1972, my husband Guru Das and I were stationed in Vrindavan to help to start the Krishna Balaram temple. Srila Prabhupada wanted Vrindavan and Mayapur to be places for pilgrims to come from around the world to hear about Krishna consciousness in the Dham and to taste the beauty of the Dham. He wanted an international guest center with a vibrant Krishna conscious activities going on, and he wanted prasadam distribution. He said, especially in Vrindavan, you won't be recognized so much for your scholarship, but if you distribute prasadam nicely, and if you worship the deity nicely, you will be respected. Srila Prabhupada mercifully revealed Vrindavan to us, sometimes with encouragement and sometimes with chastisement. While we were trying to do the Vrindavan project, Srila Prabhupada gave us lots of chastisement. Chastisement is a special relationship that one has with the spiritual master, and sometimes it's difficult to appreciate its potency when you're being chastised. But in retrospect, it becomes relishable mercy that we continue to learn from years and years later. When you get chastised, you feel your energy change, and sometimes it takes a long time to put the beauty of that chastisement into perspective. I can certainly testify to that. I spent a lot of time in the bathroom crying for burning the peanuts and other things. But, the love, it was always done with love. It was always done with love. Prabhupada he emanated so much love that you would feel it. And I truly believe that you can feel it even now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And the way that you can stay devotees all your life is by tapping in to his love, because it's still available. And he's told us that.
How to deepen the relationship with Prabhupada? How to deepen the relationship with Prabhupada?
Well, that's what I'm here trying to tell you about. That's the subject matter of what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You have to hear. The first and most important thing is the ear. And if you can't hear, you can get hearing aids like me. But you can hear. So use those ears while you've got them. And you hear Prabhupada's kirtans. You sit down and listen to Prabhupada's kirtans. Listen to his bhajans, what she's talking about, Hari Hari Bifale. You listen to his bhajans and hear what he has to say. At first, you might not be able to understand his accent a little bit. I couldn't. But if you make a little prayer to Super Soul, that please help me understand, you'd be surprised. It suddenly gets very clear. You can understand. It's amazing, really. And then you meditate on, by meditate, I mean let it go in your ears and into your heart. Hear it in your mind and your heart. Just try to focus. That's a better word than meditate. Focus on the sound vibration of him singing and then explaining the bhajans and the prayers. My favorite thing was the prayers to the spiritual master every morning when I would sit right next to his Vyasa-san and hear him singing the prayers to the spiritual master. To me, it was like, I still do it, only I have to use big boom box and turn it up. But you have access to these things that we're very fortunate we have this technology that you can have access to. And were you here the other day whenever I read that verse, 4:20:25? Most important verse in the Bhagavatam, in my opinion, okay? That's maybe my opinion. Other people may have other opinions, but to me, that's the one. That's the one about how the voice of the pure devotee is scattered with the saffron dust from the lotus feet of the Lord. You remember, right? You were here, so you remember. Once Srila Prabhupada was in Delhi when I came from Vrindavan and joined him there. Although he knew that I was a part of the Vrindavan project and was just visiting the Delhi temple, Prabhupada said to me, "How could you have let this happen?" I didn't know what he was referring to. Srila Prabhupada said, "You have left Krishna sitting on the fence post." I tried to explain, "Srila Prabhupada, I'm just visiting. I don't have anything to do with the deity program here." But Prabhupada chastised me because it's the disciples' duty to try to preserve what the Guru has given. He said, "I have trained you in deity worship," and he felt that I should extend myself to the Delhi temple too. He also said to all of us, "You may think that this is a stone statue or an idol standing before you. And you may think, let me give this rubbish garland to this stone statue, and Krishna will not mind. But if you do that, Krishna will remain a statue for you, a stone statue for you forever. So please take care." He made it very clear how important it is to be attentive in our service to Krishna and in our service to Krishna's devotees. Under the merciful instructions of the spiritual master, and in a loving way, we're supposed to help each other go back to Godhead. That's a glorious thing to explore because there's no end to it. As long as we're breathing, there is no end to the potential of helping each other become Krishna conscious in every minute of our existence by following the instructions of our spiritual master. That's pretty profound, isn't it? In the beginning of the Vrindavan project, I was the only woman in the party. All the others were men, and all of us had important roles to fill. My role was the deity department and Prabhupada's rooms. When we made the temple, we made every mistake you could possibly make. And one really big mistake was the floor in Srila Prabhupada's room. It was an amalgamate floor with the wrong mixture of black, so that when it dried, the black color continued coming off of it. And nothing we did stopped the black color from coming off of that floor. Prabhupada said, "Who has done this?" I made the ridiculous comment, "Srila Prabhupada, I am not sure what to do." He said, "No intelligence, there's no intelligence there." That's very true, Srila Prabhupada. Do you have any suggestions how we could take better care of the room? And then he said, no, you figure this out. It took many months before the floor was finally clean. Srila Prabhupada was very strict with me about cleaning. When he went for his morning walk in Vrindavan, we had a whole cleaning system, so every surface in his room was cleaned twice. One morning, Prabhupada came back from his walk, sat down at his desk, took his mini staple gun out of its plastic protective sleeve, opened the staple gun so it was flat, rubbed his pinky finger in the space between the knob and the staple and said, "Dust, who has cleaned my room?" I said, "I did, Srila Prabhupada. Haven't I trained you how to clean the room?" "No, Srila Prabhupada, I'm so dull that I never even thought to look for the dust there." Asara, useless. Do you understand in between the... Prabhupada was strict with me in many ways, but I treasure that today. I treasure that dust in Srila Prabhupada's staple gun, because when the spiritual master is strict, it helps us to be conscious of what conditioning means. Otherwise, conditioning is just a word. The statement, "I'm conditioned from time immemorial," is hard to wrap your mind around. Conditioning is a huge thing. Unless the spiritual master trains us, how will we get out of our conditioned state? So when the spiritual master chastises us by giving us instructions on simple things, it's helpful. Srila Prabhupada came in and out of Vrindavan many times in 1973 because we Western disciples had no knowledge of the language or of anything to do with business or of the social customs of the Holy Dham, but we were trying to build the Krishna Balaram temple. We had to accept the obstacles that Krishna put in front of us to help us learn how to get out of this material world. And Srila Prabhupada had to come many times to help us move the project forward in a timely fashion. Once Srila Prabhupada came for a short time, and afterwards Tejas, Gurudas, Shamsundar, and I brought him to the Delhi airport. His plane was delayed, and we were sitting in a little group waiting when we heard this click, 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 clack, click, click, clack, coming from a 20-year-old girl with tall, high-heel shoes, black stockings, and a mini dress. Shamsundar said to Prabhupada, "We're not in Vrindavan anymore, Srila Prabhupada." Prabhupada looked at him and said, "Yes, we are in Vrindavan. This is not Vrindavan." This is not Vrindavan? That made a light bulb turn on in me that said, yes, you leave Vrindavan, but Vrindavan is also in the heart. You can drink in Vrindavan using all of our senses, and when we leave the Dham of Vrindavan, we can bring its atmosphere with us wherever we go. Every time I remember these defining moments with Srila Prabhupada, I learn from them. Srila Prabhupada once made the simple, obvious comment that in order to remember, you must hear and chant. He said, your remembering will become less effective to the degree that you hear less and chant less. So those three things, hearing, chanting, and remembering, which are part of the 9 processes of bhakti, are also the core of my relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Hearing about and remembering Srila Prabhupada are the 2 most important things in all my spiritual life. I'm going to repeat that one. Hearing about and remembering Srila Prabhupada are the 2 most important things in all my spiritual life. Hearing and remembering are Srila Prabhupada's beautiful gifts to us, and I am deeply grateful for this transcendental mercy. So that's the answer to your question. That's the answer to your question. You need to hear his books, you need to hear his lectures, and you need to hear him sing. Because if you'll read that verse, you'll read that verse?
I will read it.
4:20:25. What did you get out of it? What did it say?
I will read it later. I did not yet.
Well, read it for the other people. Just read part of it. 4/20/25.
It's loading.
Huh?
It's the internet is not so fast. My dear Lord, you are glorified by the selected verses uttered by great personalities. Such glorification of your lotus feet is just like saffron particles. When the transcendental vibration from the mouths of great devotees carries the aroma of the saffron dust of your lotus feet, the forgetful living entity gradually remembers his eternal relationship with you. Devotees thus gradually come to the right conclusion about the value of life. My dear Lord, I therefore do not need any other benediction but the opportunity to hear from the mouth of your pure devotee.
And in the purport, Prabhupada goes a little bit further into it and says that saffron dust, that a living entity can be sleeping up until that moment, but just by hearing the sound, although it sounds like we all can make sounds, we can all talk, we can all sing to some extent, but it's totally different because the voice of Srila Prabhupada is sprinkled with the saffron dust coming from the lotus feet of the Lord. That's what he's explaining in there. And by hearing that voice, we become awakened. So one of the most important things you can do, well, actually Jamuna is saying it's the most, and this is how I became a devotee. There were no books. We didn't have a Gita. There were no books. There was no Harinam. There was really just Prabhupada's voice. And yet, somehow or other, I'm still here 50 years later, same thing with her. Well, she's passed away now, but she, obviously was a very great devotee. And before she left this world, she said, our future is very bright. And she had a big smile on her face when she left this world. So this is important to hear. You need to listen, get the videos, get the tapes. There's so much available. And although the tape recorders weren't that great, maybe compared to now, there are devotees who've cleaned things up and improved, not changed, but just, tried to make the sound a little clearer. And it's you can put them in your flash drive, or I don't know how people would, I guess iPods are old-fashioned now, so I don't know what people use now, but whatever they are that's available, and you should try to hear from Srila Prabhupada. That's, I think, how you make your connection. Any questions? Question?
Hare Krishna. I just wondered if Prabhupada did many initiation ceremonies in Hawaii, because recently we found out that he had one Norwegian disciple.
I can't hear you. Come forward. Can you please come forward? You have a lovely accent. Unfortunately, your lovely accent eludes me a little bit.
I wrote it down because maybe you can just read it.
Oh. Recently, it came to our notice that Srila Prabhupada had one Norwegian disciple. She was initiated in Hawaii. Her name is Lila Smarna. Her birth name was Lisa. Yes, I knew her. Is she still alive? I knew her. I knew her in Vrindavan. And I knew her in Hawaii also. I remember her, Lila Smarna. She spent much time in Vrindavan. But I think she had cancer.
we just heard about her when she left her body, because her parents contacted us when she left her body. She lived in Norway. She left her body in Norway.
In Norway.
Yes.
I know, I didn't know. I knew her. I didn't know her real well, but sometimes I gave her, I had a car, I gave her a ride from the store if I saw her there. And I went to the Yamuna with her once, and I knew her. So
She had some deities. Deities.
completely,
The deities. Deities.
yes. She lived in Vrindavan, and she lived the Vrindavan lifestyle for many, many years. She had deities. She was very... I didn't know her as well as you may think, but, you know. So that's nice. Prabhupada's mercy spread all over the world. Isn't it amazing if you think about it? In 10 years, it doesn't happen in the, it's amazing. There's right now, there's kirtans going on in Africa, there's kirtans going on in some of the Islamic countries, there's kirtans going on in the Western countries, in South. In spite of all of the problems of the world, the wars, the politics, the insanity that, kirtan's still going on. And it's not going to go away. It continues going around the globe. That's why Harinam is so, so important. That's why we have a saint here named Vedasara who takes the Harinam party out. It's very, very important because it melts down the karma of the whole world. That's why street chanting, street Sankirtan, that's what we did 8 hours a day. That's how we spread the movement. I was in Hawaii, and we would go out for 4 hours in the morning downtown, and then 4 hours in the evening in Waikiki, which is a tourist center, and people would come there from all over the world. There would be visitors. Usually there's I forget how many, 7 million visitors a year or something like that. They come for 2 weeks vacation, for holiday, and they would hear the Harinam, and they would or maybe they would get a book or a magazine, and then they'd go back. And that way, it got spread all over, and it's still happening. Yeah. Come forward, please, because I have a hard time hearing you. It's also kind of dark back there, so I can't really...
Hare Krishna, Mother. Thank you for the inspiring class. I would like to ask, in your experience, what do preachers need to do to stay on preaching? What mistakes were made in the past and how to avoid them nowadays in preaching?
Say that again.
What mistakes were done in preaching and how to avoid them nowadays?
What mistakes make in preaching and how to avoid them? You mean in preaching to the public?
Yeah,
or do you mean in preaching...
No, it's in public, Sankirtan, Harinam, public preaching
Mostly
too.
public. Well, I don't know your culture. I'm not German, so it's a little hard for me to answer that. But I know that there was one statement that really struck me that Atmavidya made last year, that he was in the Leipzig Rath Yatra, and he told about how in early days in Germany, people were like this. They would get in circles and just argue and yell and get a job, and they were really nasty, angry. And he made this comment that how surprised he was. He said he went to and he hadn't seen any Rath Yatras or anything in many, many years. And he made some comment that how the people had changed. The people were, some of them might walk by and make some comment, but mostly they were accepting which wasn't the case 50 years ago at all in Germany. I'm sure you know. There was a lot of problems. And I thought about that for a while and realized that it was the first time I really understood the purpose of street Sankirtan. That it changes because whoever's walking by, they're not going to come to the temple maybe the society's so sinful, especially way back then, they're not going to come to the temple, but if they walk by and they hear this vibration, it melts down the karmas of a society. And for the first time, I mean, it's just after 50 years I'm realizing this. I'm not the smartest light bulb on the block, so I hadn't really realized that before, that's what happens. That by the constant Harinam parties, and you notice Lord Chaitanya has drums and cymbals, it attracts attention. It's drums and cymbals are like, like that. And so what I realized is that this is why Prabhupada stressed so many times, Harinam is first, then japa, cleaning the temple, deity worship, everything else, he said, was secondary to Harinam. And there are statements like this that you can find online, I'm sure. I'm not a researcher, but so I think that it's important that you realize what you're doing, and then so far as you're, by going out regularly on Harinam, and I'm happy to see that you do it in Passau all the time. I stay in touch with Simachalam on WhatsApp or on Telegram when I'm in America, because I like to feel like I'm a part of this community even though I'm light years away. So anyway, I think one of the things that we have to do, there's an old saying that people don't really care what you think until you show them that you care. They don't really care what you think. But if you show them that you care about them, then they become very interested in what you have to say. And so that's one of the things, is that we have to approach preaching with a mood of compassion, not with a mood of, well, I know so much more than you. Or I'm such a, I'm elevated, you're just a dirty, karmi meat eater, If you go with that attitude, it's not going to work. But if you can approach them like Lord Chaitanya says, blade of grass stuff, if you actually can just be, and sometimes that's difficult because the people are not that receptive. But that's also a part of becoming humble in our own way, it keeps us not getting any expanded head about how great we are. So, does that answer your question? Good. How many go out every day? But I mean, it's difficult because you have so few people here, and keeping the deity worship, I mean, there's a huge amount of work that has to be done here. Huge. I could just imagine. And the deity worship is so nicely done, so extraordinary every day. He's just flamingly gorgeous every single day. Today he's in green and yellow. Those are my favorite colors. And it's a huge amount of work, so I understand it's very difficult. And then also the weather here is a little bit difficult too. I know the Germans saying there's no bad weather, just bad clothes, but that doesn't work for me. So if there's no other questions, what time is it? I'm leaving tomorrow, so I got to go pack. And thank you very much. And I hope that the Lord will allow me to come back again, because this is the most wonderful temple, and you're all really fortunate to be here. And I hope that everything goes really well. And I hope that things are, I hope things become better in Europe. Hare Krishna. You will go back to Norway? When will you go back?
Bergen.
Oh, 24th of this month. Oh, you're going to miss the whole summer. Do they have summers in Norway? A little bit. Does it snow in the summer? But the snow melts in the summer. Oh, it melts in April. I can't even imagine, you know. And yet it must be very beautiful, you know. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So this book, for your information, is available on Amazon. I'm not selling it. I mean, I did buy some to promote, but I highly recommend it, especially, well, no, not just for the ladies, for everyone, because this is a lot of history. There's a lot of history and a lot of Prabhupada's, the way he dealt with people. And also Shamsundar's book and Mukunda's book, and I talked to Gopi Gita today, and those books are all available from Bhaktivedanta Library. This is available from Bhaktivedanta Library in Belgium, or on Amazon.
May I take a picture?